Sir, please, he's just a child. The waitress whispered softly, her voice trembling but steady enough to make the entire restaurant go silent. The man at the table, tall, immaculately dressed, the kind of man whose wristwatch alone could buy the chandelier above them, turned sharply. His son sat across the table, tears streaming down his flushed cheeks, his small hands clenched around a silver spoon. The boy's sobs echoed through the candlelit room, cutting through the polite chatter and soft piano music. It was supposed to be a perfect dinner. The billionaire, Alexander Grant, had just sealed a multi-million-dollar deal. His assistants had booked the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the kind of place where every plate looked like art. He had brought his 7-year-old son, Ethan, to celebrate. But the boy hadn't smiled once since they sat down. "Ethan, enough," Alexander muttered, trying to control his tone. "We're in public. Stop crying." But the boy only cried harder, his little chest heaving. The waitress, standing nearby, couldn't help but notice. The trembling lip, the untouched plate of pasta, the loneliness in his eyes. She'd seen that look before. It wasn't hunger. It was heartbreak. The waitress's name was Lily. She'd been working double shifts for weeks to pay her rent. She moved like someone who had known struggle, graceful, quiet, but carrying a kind of invisible weight that made her seem older than her years. As she approached the table with a napkin, Alexander waved her off. "We're fine," he said curtly. But they weren't. The boy was shaking. Lily crouched beside the child, lowering herself to his level, ignoring the disapproving glances from nearby tables. "Hey there," she whispered, offering a kind smile. "What's wrong, sweetheart? You don't like your food?" Ethan shook his head, his voice barely audible. I just want mommy." The restaurant froze. Alexander's jaw clenched, and something flickered across his face. A crack in his polished armor. Lily realized then. The seat beside the boy, the one with the empty plate and untouched wine glass, had been meant for someone who never came. Alexander's wife, Ethan's mother. The silence between them was louder than any outburst. Lily stood quietly, unsure if she should apologize or leave. But Ethan's sobs only grew, his small hands reaching out for comfort that no one was giving him. "Ethan," Alexander hissed, slamming his palm against the table. A few heads turned. "Enough. You're embarrassing yourself." That's when Lily spoke. Her voice was calm but carried the kind of conviction that only comes from pain. "Sir, he's not embarrassing himself. He's just missing his mom." Alexander turned toward her, eyes sharp. "Excuse me." She swallowed hard, feeling her hands tremble. "Sometimes, it's not the food or the fancy place or the gifts. Sometimes kids just need someone to hold them." It was a line that shouldn't have been said, not to a billionaire, not by a waitress. But truth doesn't always ask for permission. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Lily slowly reached out and placed the folded napkin on the table, brushing crumbs aside. "He only needs a mom," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. The words hit Alexander like a punch to the chest. His wife had passed away 2 years earlier, a car accident on a rainy night. Since then, Alexander had thrown himself into work, drowning his grief in boardrooms and deadlines. He had built empires, but his son had been quietly crumbling in the shadows. Ethan's tears slowed. He looked up at Lily with wide, searching eyes. She smiled softly, dabbing his cheeks with the napkin. "There. Better?" The boy nodded, sniffling. Alexander watched, silent and shaken. For the first time in months, someone had soothed his son. Not with money, not with toys, but with kindness. When Lily stood to leave, Alexander spoke, his voice softer now. "Wait." She froze. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry for snapping. It's been a long time since I've done this." "Parenting?" she asked gently. He managed a small, broken laugh. "Living." The next few minutes passed quietly. Alexander asked her name. She told him she worked nights, studied during the day, and sometimes brought leftovers home for her younger sister. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just being honest. And for once, Alexander listened. He invited her to sit for a moment, but she declined. "Guests first," she smiled. "I'll check on your dessert." As she walked away, Alexander looked at his son. You like her, don't you? Ethan nodded shyly. She reminds me of Mommy. Something broke inside him then. The guilt, the loneliness, the walls he'd built to survive. He reached out, pulling his son into his arms. I miss her too, buddy. The entire restaurant seemed to exhale. For once, Alexander didn't care who saw him cry. When Lily returned with dessert, she noticed something different. The boy was smiling. The father looked a human again. They finished dinner quietly. When they left, Alexander slipped something into her hand. Not money, but a small, folded note. That night, after closing, Lily opened it. Inside was a card with a phone number and a message. You reminded me what really matters. If you ever need anything, or if Ethan ever needs a friend, call me. Weeks passed. Then one rainy evening, Lily received a call. It was Alexander. His voice sounded warmer, gentler. Ethan's been asking if you could join us for dinner. No fancy places, just home-cooked spaghetti. She hesitated, smiling through tears. I'd like that. That dinner was the beginning of something unexpected. Not romance at first, but healing. Lily became a friend to Ethan. Someone who listened, laughed, and filled the quiet spaces grief had left behind. And slowly, Alexander began to change. He spent less time in meetings and more time learning how to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. The man who once measured life in profits began to measure it in moments. In laughter, in small hands tugging at his sleeve, in gratitude whispered before bedtime. Months later, Ethan was no longer the boy who cried through dinners. He was smiling again, because someone had reminded his father that love wasn't something you could buy or schedule. It was something you had to give. And one evening, as they all sat together watching the sunset from Alexander's balcony, Lily turned to him and said, You've done well with him, you know? Alexander smiled, his eyes glistening. No, he said softly. We did. Because sometimes the right person doesn't just change your story, they help you rewrite it. Sometimes what money can't fix, kindness can heal. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and tell us, what does family mean to you?